very much to the organizers for inviting me to this wonderful conference. I can see we have lost a couple of comrades, but that's very common. My name is Bavisi. I'll just spend a minute to talk to you about my foray into cybersecurity. And you might have heard of a company called EC0c0n. We have devoted our lives towards creating hackers. A lot of people misinterpret that into thinking that we create the bad guys, but really our role is to create cybersecurity experts to fight the bad guys. And you might have heard of certified ethical hacker. I'm going to be talking about a topic. I think it's going to come up in the slide. Is it back? Combating the next generation attacks. And my entire talk in the next 45 minutes is actually focused on what can we see as the propagation of attacks that we, the community, are probably going to be facing. So from the receiving side, what will actually happen? So I wanted to, not spend a lot of time, but I think you've seen far too many pieces of information and data that talk about cybersecurity vulnerabilities, cybersecurity crimes, cybersecurity spending around the world, the amount of malwares that are out there. There are too many. And I think that we do not need to spend even a second talking about the impact of what the community is actually facing on. But what we have to figure out is really, how do we get there? So if you take a look at the traditional organization, in 2001, when I started EC0c0n, this was right after 9/11, the entire idea behind it was, how do we stop the bad guys from attacking our networks? At that point in time, cybersecurity really meant having an antivirus and having a firewall. So if you had a firewall, it was like, wow, you understand cybersecurity. People would respect you, and this guy is investing in cybersecurity. That was 2001, right? Today, try going to a corporation and saying, my organization has budgets in cybersecurity because I have a firewall. You'll be laughed at. Because the truth is, the world has moved on tremendously. So if we take a look at why did we get here, and I just want to take you through a journey before we get to next generation. From 2001 to 2018, and as we move to 2020, initially the networks were absolutely simple, right? We did not have many complex networks. We invented, desktop computing, and then we started figuring out how do we protect desktop computing, and we say, okay, we'll have antiviruses, and that will solve the problem. And then we said, oh, there's network computing, and then we say, oh, wow, we have networks, now what do we do? Okay, we invent the firewall, then oh, wait a minute, we need the IDS, and then we need the IPS, and then we say, oh, we have a lot of data, so we start inventing encryption. We have encryption that gets deployed. And just as we are figuring out how do we deal with this enormous problem of networking, we now start realizing that, wait a minute, there is a new opportunity in the world, and that's called mobility. So endpoints get completely exploited and exploded, and we get a lot of motivated threat actors that start coming and trying to attack all of these endpoints around the world. So the world now, while trying to figure out how to deal with desktop security and dealing with network security, now starts dealing with multiple levels of threat actors. We're talking about organized criminals, we're talking about hacktivists, we're talking about terrorists across the world, we're talking about organized crime, which is the #1 problem. And this has become a major problem. But the times have really changed, because while we are dealing with desktop computing and network computing and then mobility, we invented the cloud. And now we start looking and dealing with cloud security. Okay, wait a minute, we have data in public cloud, private cloud, or how do I encrypt data in cloud, and who's going to own the data, and how am I going to deal with security? And while we're figuring that out, we start inventing blockchain, artificial intelligence, deep learning. So the point I'm trying to tell you is that times have really changed. The propagation of attacks that we are dealing with is coming at such a rapid pace simply because the innovation in technology is far ahead of the implementation in cybersecurity. The cybersecurity community is not able to keep up, right? I mean, if you take a look at blockchain, for example, right? I'm not sure how many of you follow, but I could go out to the streets in Kochi and sell a blockchain dosa, and I'll be the #1 restaurant, because everything that blockchain sells. If you talk to private equities, you will see that private equities are talking all the time about companies that keep coming up, raising capital, talking about these innovative technologies. And you know what? Nobody wants to miss out. Everybody wants to use 3 core words. Blockchain enabled, using deep learning, so we have artificial intelligence. And the moment we see that, we're like, wow, this technology is really good. Question is, how well is blockchain implemented? How much of deep learning is really deep learning? What is really artificial intelligence? So times, ladies and gentlemen, has really changed, and this is going to pose a major challenge to the cybersecurity community. So the truth is, instead of talking of the next generation attacks, this talk is about hacking the next generation. So if you take a look at my title is talking about the next generation attacks, but in my opinion, the way the next generation attacks will happen is by hacking the next generation. That is going to be the major motive of hacking communities and criminals around the world, and this is what we're going to have to deal with. So I will start with something that you will say, is completely unimportant, and this is something that I don't see that as a major security threat. And I want to start by talking to you about hearing aids, right? How many of you have relatives that have a hearing aid? Can you raise your hand? Okay, you. I grew up, my uncle, my father had 2 brothers, and one of the brothers actually had a hearing disability from birth. So he actually had one of those, if you remember those brown hearing aids, right, with a tube that actually went up. And then my grandfather had a hearing problem too. So the theory goes that very soon you might see me with one of those, but so far so good. My grandfather had an older machine. He actually had a device like a headphone with a wire. I'm not sure. Anyone remember that? The headphone with a wire? Okay, those that remember, you're very old. Okay, you're just like me. We are old people, because the new generation say, what? I've never seen, what the hell are you talking about? It was this big device that will have this sound, they go, ee, and then they take this out and they reduce the volume and put it up. So naturally, I grew up in this environment, and if you realize the new hearing aids, you don't see those wires anymore, right? What you're seeing now are Bluetooth enabled or Wi-Fi enabled hearing aids. And I'm not sure how many of you have seen this, but this industry is a very large industry. It's actually reaching billions of dollars, right? So we talk about Facebook, and we talk about Twitter, and we talk about LinkedIn, and we talk about these large unicorns in the industry of cybersecurity and technology. But guess what? There are 3 companies in the world that are already a $1 billion valuation dealing with hearing loss solution. Isn't that amazing? Right? You don't hear about them, right? 3 large companies in the world. Now, to those of you that do not know this, the newer hearing aids are really hearing aid devices that has a small little black piece. It can be black, it can be brown. There are different varieties. And what happens there is pretty smart. So you enter into a meeting, and I chair the board of EC Council University in the US, and one of our board members has a hearing disability too. He's a veteran, and he would actually come and he'll say, Jay, just 1 second before you start, because you end the table. He'll walk up to me, he'll take out the device, he'll place the device in front of me, right? And then he walks to the back of the room, and he has a small little piece that was his hearing piece. What is actually happening is actually a Bluetooth enabled connectivity between his hearing piece and the device. Now, you would ask me, what happens if there are 20 people in the room? How do I move the mic? They can actually split the device on one end, the second on the other end, and it's connecting to me to a Wi-Fi or Bluetooth enabled. This simple piece of technology is actually vulnerable to a cybersecurity attack. So when we talk of next generation attacks, I know that we're all talking about malware, we're talking about ransomware, we're talking about we need to have an advanced SOC, and we got to have security penetration testers, and we want to do application security. But I would like you to think about a next generation attack as something far more simplistic. Hacking simple devices that are used for biometric purposes for humans. So James Clapper, who is a former advisor to President Obama, actually had his hearing device security cleared. So think about it. If you come from the law enforcement community, how many of your seniors and how much of critical information that you're actually having is actually being shared with people with a hearing aid? Because those devices can be vulnerable to a hack attack, and a lot of confidential information, whether it's in a cabinet or whether it's a state cabinet or whether it's a ministerial level or whether it's in a law enforcement era, is susceptible to an attack. 3 weeks ago, we were in Atlanta. AC Council runs a conference in Atlanta every year called Hacker Halted. You may have heard of it. And we did a simple demonstration, and we said, is there anyone here with a hearing aid that volunteers for us to do a live demo? And one gentleman stood up. He was the dean of a university. And, we got him to sign his permission document, and we hacked it immediately. We switched off his hearing aid, right? So what I'm trying to tell you is that the next generation attacks are attacks that we might not actually think about, right? Now, as I said, these devices are enabled by Wi-Fi, it's enabled by Bluetooth, but remember, we're talking about a $9 billion industry. We're talking about 3 companies that already have billion-dollar valuation. We're talking about exploding requirement. Now we come to cars, and I know that you all know the great Tesla model, 0 to 100 miles per hour in 2.7 seconds. I've actually driven an S model. It's amazing, right? It's amazing. It's like you're flying in the air, right? You just press the accelerator, and next thing you know, you're flying out, right? But I'm not sure how many of you knew this, but they actually have a keyless system. They actually have a key fob that you use to activate this car. The key fob was actually hacked. So we could, so the researchers could actually take over Tesla Model S, right? And I think you all know the hype behind the Tesla Model S, and you can see that the brand, the enormous brand value behind a Tesla Model S. I was told that in India, in Ahmedabad, there was one gentleman that ordered the first Model S, and apparently they were, when the car arrived at the port, there were like 50 journalists, taking pictures and TV crews of the major moment when Tesla arrived in India. But imagine that all of that is over with a couple of seconds when the car can be cloned because of the key fob. So you've compromised the car. Question really is, how did that happen? It happened because of one very important thing that's happening in the world, and that is the researchers were using a very low-level encryption, right? So instead of a 128 or a 256, they're using a 40 bit of encryption on the key fobs. Now, of course, the researchers did a responsible disclosure, and they went back to Tesla, and they changed it, and the new models now come with a higher bit of encryption. But what's very interesting was a statement from Tesla. Now, normally, if you look at the traditional cars, right, when you have a braking, a problem with a brake, a problem with the accelerator, they have a recall, a major recall, right? Tesla issued a statement and says, you know what, security threats are very common in the world, and with the best efforts that you would do, these threats will keep coming up. So for $200, if you were to pay, we will give you a new key fob with a high encryption, but we don't believe that we've hit below the line because we provided encryption. Right? Although it's a very low-level elementary encryption, but we provided encryption, and the world bought that idea. The point here is that manufacturers that are all gung-ho about design, about application, about uniformity, about usability, about brand consciousness, are not being as serious about cybersecurity. An entire Model S was designed 0 to 100 miles an hour in 2.7 seconds, but somebody forgot that encryption is a very important part of your key fob feature. And this is something that the next generation will have to deal with. I think that there's going to be a tremendous amount of change in manufacturing processes. I'll talk about IoT in a second. And you will see that there are a lot of challenges, but this is going to be the next level. So you can take a look at the news from the Wall Street Journal and the Wired publication that talks about this. Now I talk about the next generation, right? So we're talking about hacking of next generation, and let's talk about smart cities. Now this is a very interesting concept, right? So as I grew up, if I wanted to cross the street, and I think this is still happening around the world, you would actually walk up to the edge of the traffic system, and you would press a button, and you'll wait, right? And then the lights turn red on the opposite side. It says pedestrian crossing, and you cross, right? Although in India, a red light means a recommendation that you could stop if you want to. A lot of cars. I remember the first time I came to India, I was coming out of the airport and I saw a zebra crossing, and being the ignorant foreigner that was not trained, I saw a zebra crossing. I had the rights to cross over. I nearly got ran over by a car, right? And then someone pulled me out of my collar and says, "What the hell are you doing, man? This is zebra crossing is a recommendation that they may choose to stop, right?" But that's how most traffic systems around the world works, right? You walk in and you pass on. Now imagine a smart city, and this is coming, there's no question about it, it's coming across the world, it's going to come to India as well, where emergency services will have IoT-enabled sensors that are connected to traffic systems. So when an ambulance is passing by, the traffic light systems will change to green, giving a right of way to the ambulance services. Imagine a city where the fire department will not need to play on the siren anymore because they have IoT-enabled devices that are changing the signals of traffic so that they are having a right of passageway. Imagine a city where you have got dumpsters that actually have IoT-enabled sensors that are able to say that the dumpsters are now at an 80% capacity, and therefore I need to get the municipality vehicles to come and empty a dumpster. Imagine a smart city that has blood pressure machines or various kind of geriatrics enabled devices that are provided onto the aging population, so that if a ailing person falls down, an automatic IoT signal will be connected to their physician to say that someone is immobile for the last 9 hours and you need to send an ambulance, right? This is all part of the era of the next generation that's going to come along. Now think about the Tesla and think about the key fob and the lesson that we can talk about. But when we talk about smart cities, you're talking about an era where this is inevitable. And we are going to be dealing with a tremendous amount of challenges in the security community. Now IoT provides a tremendous amount of challenge. And I'll tell you, I can give a 3-hour talk on an IoT security, but in my limited time, I probably have a few more minutes, so I'll wrap up. But the challenge with IoT are a couple. Number one, there isn't a uniform framework, right? Every manufacturer is on their own framework, and there's a race over, which framework and I'm going to be on. Number two, remember the mobile devices I talked about, and we talked about the endpoint, the fact that we, the security community, were not able to deal with the endpoint security because of the explosion of mobile devices. Now guess what? The human population is approximately 8 billion people. We've already crossed the number of devices to the number of humans in the world. So 8 billion devices, in the next couple of years you would see that you probably have 12 billion devices to 8 billion human beings around the world. So we have more devices than humans. Now when IoT comes up, it's going to be mayhem, because you're talking about an explosion of a number of devices that are happening across the world. And how are we going to protect this? Because we're having a problem even with mobility, and now with IoT devices, you're probably talking about 50 billion devices to 8 billion population. So the challenges in IoT are going to be, we have an exploding topography of the number of endpoints. The endpoints are going to be pushed right to the edge, and we will need to protect all of these devices. Each device has its own nuances. Each device has its own framework. These IoT devices, the technology is not at the level where it has reached to the level of sophistication required in encryption, because they are not able to encrypt and decrypt at the same time and yet maintain a small chip design. So there are so many challenges that we are facing in IoT. And smart cities are on the backbone of IoT technology. So the next generation attacks that we will have to focus on and think about and resolve is coming around IoT security. As AC Council, I'll tell you, the majority of the calls that we are getting from large organizations and from governments around the world is around our work in IoT security, right? We do get, conversations around ethical hacking and penetration testing, and that's fine. But more often than not, the two largest areas that we get called upon is, Jay, well, we need your help in the area of IoT security, and we need your help in the area of application security. These are the two of the most common hypotheses that we would hear, or as far as challenges are concerned, from very large organizations and CISOs. And I think the next generation attacks that we're talking about is going to be in this area. Of course, we have got the mayhem stories of, smart meters being attacked and grids coming down and SCADA systems being compromised, and, but I'll give you a real life example. We were called in by a eastern country that is not an eastern country in Asia that is not speaking any language but English. So you know which country I'm talking about. And this country was hosting a very major event of a very large nature, and they actually actually had cameras around the entire city. So we were called in because what the mayor was very concerned about is that what if there was a cyber attack during this specific event that would happen, and what if the hackers got control of the various IoT-enabled devices that the city already had. So you would see that the challenges, we went in, we brought in our experts, and guess what we found? We found that the cameras were vulnerable because basic protocols were not adhered to. The SOC that was actually monitoring these IoT-enabled devices did not have the right connectors, so that they could not get the right kind of correlation data that will actually be able to provide information that was relevant. So these are challenges that cities are happening. Take a look at London, for example. Everywhere in London that you would go, you turn your head, you'll see a camera, right? What if those cameras got in the hands of the criminals? What would happen to the city? What if there was an asymmetric warfare that took place at the same time while the hackers had control of these camera systems, therefore giving them leading advantage of being able to position where is law enforcement, where are the most number of people, where can I cause the most amount of damage. So these are the kind of mayhem stories that I don't want to talk about, but I think it's something that we should be very concerned about, because as you can see in this article, even the basic vulnerabilities that the security community has known forever were not addressed by the researchers, because we as a human race are so focused on the design, on the usability, on the speed. We are in a race that we want to be the first that's going out and coming up with this great solution so we can get all the coverage, but we're not thinking through the processes, especially when it comes to cybersecurity. So I'm very sensitive of my time. Let's talk about Hong Kong. I recently visited Hong Kong as part of my work, and I met with one of the many blockchain exchanges, right? So as far as blockchain is concerned, everyone's of the opinion that, oh, blockchain is a very safe technology. It has got this multi-device, design and architecture, and the encryption, and the fact that no one really owns it gives it so much of safety. So I was sitting with the chief architect with a major blockchain exchange, and the conversation was around the fact that yes, you're right, blockchain as a technology, amazing, right? Great idea, great promise, right? Regardless of which part of the scale you're in, whether you feel that a pure public blockchain is the way, or pure private blockchain, or a hybrid blockchain is the way forward. But the core was in the challenges of the implementation of the stock exchange. Blockchain as a technology is only secure if you implement it correctly across all the different layers. So take a look at this example, ZAF, which is and you can read about this, which is a stock exchange, which is a cryptocurrency exchange in Japan, and they lost 60 million US dollars just like that. And guess what? Because of the nature of blockchain, you're not going to be able to identify. There's not much forensics that's going to help you here, because it's going to be very difficult to deal with attribution of who or which were the criminal groups that were behind us. So let's take a look at a recap. Human devices are not secure. Smart cities are not secure. Your transportation systems, vehicles are not secure. The future generations bank, our bank, right? To those of you 40 and above, used to be, walking in, standing in line into a bank on a Friday, cashing out a check, right? That's what we understood as banking. But my kids, my daughter has never stepped into a bank. She doesn't know what a bank is. She does not understand that that there's a bank and then you press a button, you get a ticket. Which, by the way, in my era, if you walk into a bank, there's air conditioned, and you press a ticket and get a piece of paper, it says number 54. To me, that was advanced, because I grew up in an environment where you stand in line and if you are first, you get served. To my kids, they've never been to a bank. They have no idea what a bank is. They've heard of a bank. To them, it's e-banking. All they know is that there's this token and there's this username and there's this password, and you get cash and you walk to an ATM and you deposit cash and you do a transaction. That is the new generation's perception of what a bank is. So it's electronic. It's not physical money, right? So it's funny that that's a fact. But think about it. How many of your kids have been to a bank? How many of your kids have experienced an actual banking transaction the way we understand it? So their bank is electronic. And electronic banks are more often than not thinking about serious implementation in blockchain. Most financial organizations around the world have pilots in blockchain. Most. Right? Every major bank has a pilot in the era of blockchain, because there's so much of promise. And there's so many blockchain consultants coming up. Who's real? Who really understands it, right? And then you have so many cryptocurrency exchanges coming up, and guess what? They all get hacked. Now let me tell you, who do you think is behind this? Cyber criminals? Any idea? Come on, Cochin. I need some motivation here. Who do you think is behind this? Criminals? What if I said rogue nations? And you know which nations I'm talking about. What if I said rogue nations that are suppressed with embargoes, that have great hacking capabilities? I mean, isn't that a great business model? Why the hell you want to come up with a complex model and develop a phishing system and send to 1 billion people an email and copy the interface of a bank and either do a spear phishing campaign or a phishing campaign? Wow, it's so complex. Why not just go after the blockchain stock exchanges? Because I know that many of them have vulnerabilities. Many of them have not thought through the process in this race. Let's run out. So the next generation attacks that are happening now, and you've seen so many cryptocurrency exchanges that have been compromised. So that's the next level. So the money is not safe as well, right? Warfare is changing tremendously as well. The Department of Defense has been spending a lot of money in research. A lot of law enforcement agencies, I'm not sure in India, but a lot of law enforcement agencies have got body cameras that are coming up. It's very common in the Western world. And I'm not sure if you know, but there are a couple of large manufacturers that have body cams, right? So that the law enforcement agents that actually show up on field force are actually sending a signal back to base camp and actually telling them what's actually going on. And that provides a tremendous amount of credibility to an event. A lot of these devices are Bluetooth enabled. So we are now talking about compromising body cam devices. That's very common. We're talking about troops that are actually on the battleground, and troops that are carrying IoT enabled devices that are able to give the field marshals an ability to understand actually the position of a platoon or the position of a specific tanker or the forward position of our Marines, for example, right? There is a huge concern about the susceptibility of these devices to the bad guys, because that will give up an entire position. So with the interest of time, I'm going to spend more time of talking into something that's very interesting, because I want to live with a note that, at least you'd say that, wow, I've learned something new. So what do we do? So I saved you the trouble of sharing with you all the bad news that comes on the internet that you get 50 times a day, other than your good morning messages on WhatsApp. Facebook got compromised, and Anthem got compromised, bank got compromised, the stock exchange got compromised, and cybersecurity malware incidents are up, and we are losing the war. You get that every day. So I said, hacking the next generation attacks are all about hacking the next generation. The next generation bio-enabled devices, the next generation types of vehicles, the next generation states and city with smart city, the next generation financial systems. So what do we do? Well, what we can do is probably, take a chill pill and go to the mountains and, have a nice peaceful, time to take a deep breath and do some yoga and meditate and relax, and maybe all the world problems will go away. Would you not agree? It's a great idea, right? Probably get a massage because you're in Kerala, and that might be the way to go. Not really. I got bad news for you here too. Let's talk about the next generation attack of hacking the human brain. Now wait a minute, Jay, is this a Star Wars story? Are you in Star Wars? Are you now going to start painting a future? No, not really. I'm going to talk to you about a technology that's been around since the 70s, right? Since the 1970s, there was already a research that's been done of being able to decipher your thoughts. Now, that's very dangerous to a lot of people, because a human being has a few thousand thoughts every single minute. Can you imagine if all of these thoughts are being captured, processed at a SOC, and then to all the gentlemen, what happens if your wife gets a copy of your thoughts every minute? What do you think happens to you? No problem? Because you are such a good man. You're talking about cleaning the world, having green earth, and solving poverty, fighting corruption. I'm sure those are the thoughts you have every single minute, right? So let me share with you a very interesting concept that's actually coming up. You guys know who this guy is? Right? Elon Musk. Somehow I'm not getting any response. Let me share with you a very important story. About 5 years ago, I was invited to speak in China to a beautiful conference like this. 1,500 people in the hall. I was the keynote speaker, and there were so many people, and I was so impressed. This is my first trip to China, and I went in and I said, how many of you agree with this? And no one raised their hands. I said, okay, this is funny. They probably don't like me, Indian guy in China. I said, okay, how many people don't agree with this? Nobody raised their hands. And then I realized nobody understood English. So I hope I'm in the right room, right? So Elon Musk, right? You can call him a genius, you can call him a maverick behind Tesla. So he is now invested heavily. I mean, you have $1 billion or multiple $1 billion. What do you do? He's investing into technology called Neuralink. Now, let me take you through this concept of Neuralink. So in the 1970s, there are already researchers that has already come up with the concept of EEG. So you guys know the electrocardiogram, right? ECG, right? Which basically checks whether you have a heart attack or not. But the human brain degeneration issue is such a big issue. We're getting people with Alzheimer's disease. We're getting people with epilepsy. So Stephen Hawking is one classic example. If you look at the kind of disorder that he had, but you could see that he's onto a device where his computer is typing what his mind was saying. Do you guys realize that? You guys know who Stephen Hawking is? How many of you know who Stephen Hawking is? How many of you don't know who Stephen Hawking is? How many of you don't care? Yeah, I'm just here for the coffee, man. Just hurry up. All right. So Stephen Hawking has a device, right? And I mean, what a brilliant mind. And we wanted to capture the entire essence of his thoughts, and that's what it's all about. So the concept of the EEG, right? And it has a long name, electroencephalography, if I'm not wrong, right? Is what it stands for, right? EEG. And what it has is they put electrodes onto your brains, and it's connected. And you might have a sleep apnea, you might have a epilepsy, you might have any of these diseases, and it actually helps convert your brain waves into a computer-enabled model that will then have an effect, right? And that's been going on. What Elon Musk wants to do, and he's not the only company, by the way, there are 3 or 4 companies doing it, is planting a chip into your brain. So it requires a surgical intervention. Now the whole concept is that your brain has 2 parts, right? The creative part and the cortex. And what he wants to do is be able to put in a chip that is AI enabled that will help you do better, right? So it improves your cognitive skills. Now just think about it for a second, right? Let's just think about the generation of our children's children for a second, right? So I talked to you about the bank. Now let's talk about this. Imagine you're sitting in front of a computer and you have a fridge, and the fridge is IoT enabled. The lights IoT enabled. The air condition IoT enabled. You're on a device and you go like, I want a cup of coffee. So you just think of a coffee, the coffee machine pops out, a cup comes out, and a beautiful espresso shot comes through. And you go like, I don't want an espresso. I actually want I want a little bit of a latte. So let me just add some milk. The fridge realizes that your milk has turned sour. So the fridge contacts Amazon, right, to order fresh milk. The milk gets arrived through a drone in your front door. Your robot, or your Ramu Kaka, as we say in India, right? To those of you from India, you know what I mean by Ramu Kaka, right? Would go up, pick up the milk, put it into the fridge. Most of you will think, Jay, you're absolutely crazy. You have a weird mind. Yes, I have a weird mind because I've been in security for the last 18 years of my life, right? I've devoted my life to this industry. But this is not far-fetched. This is what's happening. So the entire idea behind Neuralink is to be able to put in a chip into a human being so that I will be able to help the human perform better. Maybe improve vision. You might be blind, so you'll be able to see. You might have a stroke, so the chip will then take over that part of the brain so that it will connect with the other parts of the brain, and all of a sudden you don't have a stroke. You'll be able to reverse degeneration of cells. There's so many things that can be done, right? This is the future. Imagine if we cannot secure a mobile device, we can't secure our cloud, we can't secure our network, we can't secure our IoT devices. When this happens, what can happen to mankind? With that thought, I thank you very much for inviting me to this wonderful conference. I hope you have a wonderful event. Thank you very much for your hospitality. It's been a pleasure to be here.